Alrighty, got it. Got the volume correct. Got everything here running a-okay. I'll give mine of it. And now let's go on to the article talking about the interview with 6 Days in Fallujah. Alrighty. From February 2021, a most recent one, so we're not gonna just read about and follow along with this coverage back in old 2009. So let's see what things they talk about that is different or the same. 6 Days in Fallujah. Not trying to make a political commentary, creator says. An interview with the publisher of the controversial Iraq War Shooter by Charlie Hall, February 15th, 2021 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the afternoon. Those looking for the critical perspective on the Iraq War should steer clear of 6 Days in Fallujah. The controversial first-person shooter seeks to portray one of the bloodiest battles in American history, one that cost the lives of the United States and Allied forces as well as thousands of Iraqi citizens in 2004. Originally announced in 2009, the game was dropped by publisher Konami due to the objections of the families of service members killed during the Iraq War. In the 12 years since, public opinion has demonstrably shifted against that war. Against that war. It just took 12 years, supposedly. That makes the job of Peter Tammet, head of 6 Days in Fallujah publisher Victoria, perhaps harder today than it was more than a decade ago. In an interview with Polygon on Thursday, after the game was announced for a second time, it was insistent that developer Highwire Games will not grapple with political nations that led to the Titanic conflict. Ugh. Just getting from laundry. Oh god, this is like a hair. Interesting though, that actually came to be, but I think that's the thing with freaking mask or anything you wear just molds around you, your face, just to shape it. Alrighty. The machinations that led to the titular conflict. Instead, their first-person shooter will try to engender empathy for the American soldiers in the field, for the work destroying the insurgents that dug in throughout Fallujah, and for the civilians trapped in between. I think reasonable people can disagree with that, he told Polygon of his narrative strategy. For us as a team, it is really about helping players understand the complexity of urban combat. It's about the experiences of that individual that is now there because of political decisions. And we do want to show how choices that are made by policymakers affect the choices that a Marine needs to make on the battlefield, just as that Marine cannot second guess the choices by the policymakers. We're not trying to make a political commentary about whether or not the war itself was good or a bad idea. End quote. Yeah. You gotta check and see if a combatant is just waiting, camping right next to you. It's the kind of dodge that we've heard from game makers many times before, most recently from Ubisoft in the lead up to Tom Clancy's Division 2, but that game's conflict was a wholly fictional one. 6 Days of Fallujah recalls a battle that still looms large in the rear mirror of our country's headlong push into the Middle East. A tragic event seemingly on the cusp between current events and modern history. Its main characters will be real Marines and soldiers who fought there. The city of Fallujah became a hotbed of insurgent activity during the 2003 Iraq War. A terrorist named Abu Musab al-Zarqawi Zarqawi Zarqawi Zarqa Zarqa Qua 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 Qua. I'm having a hard time trying to pronounce his last name. Qua. Zakari drew fighters to that city from around the country and beyond. The violence he inspired directly caused thousands of civilian casualties, but also resulted in the deaths of a team of private military contractors from Blackwater, USA. The image of their burned and mutilated corpses hanging from a bridge becomes synonymous with the U.S. occupation of the country itself. In 2004, Western forces tried to retake the city not once, but twice. 6 days of Fallujah focuses on the Second Battle of Fallujah, which cost around 100 American lives, and according to the International Red Cross, the lives of at least 800 civilians. Looking back on the reasons for the Iraq War itself, might rightly question whether the U.S. military should have been there at all. The administration of President George W. Bush misled the American people and the world in the months before the March 2003 invasion. Was that so-called coalition willing, duped, or otherwise incentivized into the following along? Tamit it isn't interested in those questions. Yeah. Coalition of the willing. That is, yeah. Especially making fun of Canada and France with not following along with the U.S. and I don't know if officially they will call it a coalition because there would have been two coalitions around the time. It would be the one for Afghanistan and the other one for Iraq. It pretty confusing. I mean, that's the reason why in popular media we don't really use the term coalitions. Often for many reasons, people still use alliances, not legally speaking, or in a official capacity. But yeah, because what is it? You have so many countries, along with many countries of NATO still in the war of Afghanistan, along with the occupation of it, but not many participated in Iraq. I mean, that's the thing I was going to say with when it came to France and Canada, where the U.S. tries to actually make fun of them when it came to political UN talks, and so some things are crazy. Thing that occurred in the U.S. was that they tried to rename French fries to freedom fries due to the connotation of France, since a lot of people in government and in government facilities and places like in military bases and stuff like that tried to did that. I mean it's a similar tactic, not a reason, but a similar tactic of what the U.S. what they did with in World War One when it came to the German Empire, where when it came to sauerkraut, they would just call them Liberty Cabbage. No joke. But in that issue, that had to do with germophobia. Not germophobia. Not afraid of bacteria. No, on xenophobia against German people or German heritage, along with customs and all that. And that also was a big propaganda piece for the U.S. Back in the early ones, I don't know. That's something a lot of people even try to question how far and how extended it is. It's been 12 years, and it's still pretty early to actually know the goings on and stuff like that. I mean, you have so many things that are coming into light that is still covered. And, some of those things had to revolve to some current issues that happened in the Middle East, like when it came to 2014, when it came to the emergence of Daesh, ISIS, around the Western Western Asia, and to an extent other places, and along with the Cold War that's going on with Iran and Saudi Arabia, along with several other issues that's going on, like the proxy wars and conflicts in Syria. But, it does show that people are becoming more and more aware about their policy and such. But it's so such a mystery that a lot of people still are pretty confused with the whole WMD debate. Which, the thing to understand is that there was some truth to WMDs because of going to history when it came to the Iran-Iraq War, and also with the use of to Kurdish and other ethnic groups under Saddam's regime because of some tensions between the Ba'athist Party and some people that were considered undesirables and enemies of the state. But then again, I also don't understand the idea of the state. When it came to referring to those incidents, there's a lot of murky things that I do want to learn more about. But yeah, further ado, that does show in the gist a complexity of everything that's occurring. And yeah, there's a lot of things about it, but it seems that they're not going to focus on it, or that's very much what the person who's doing the interview said, that Tamti said. Okay, Didky. Okay, yeah. Come on, Zoom. Got it. He's also not interested in portraying the alleged atrocities that may have been committed there. When we describe first-person shooter as tactical, what we're often talking about is methods of movement. Where does the player go? How quickly? And with what posture? But a military shooter likewise focuses on the weapon systems that are given to the player, from instance soldiers in Fallujah. That means rifles and explosives. But there were other tools and other tactics in play during the battle in 2004. The US military has said that it is used shake and bake tactics as a combination of high explosive and white phosphorus rounds that flushed out insurgents from their hardened bunkers in order to destroy them. But using white phosphorus as a weapon and in close proximity to civilians would seem to contravene. No, I'm pronouncing it wrong. Contravene. So that's interesting with English. With CON, then TR, RA, it will be Contra, like Contra the video game series. But when you add a VE, not just an E, I believe, it will, instead of an A, the A and TRA will be Tra, it will be Tre. It will be a bit silent, the way I can explain it. So, contravene. Get rid of the VENE, it will be contra, but it will be contravene. Contra, tra, is that tra? It will be Would seem to contravene the accepted laws of war. Again, Tamten isn't interested in litigating what constitutes a war crime. No, so this person, Peter Tamten was executive vice president of Bungie during the development and launch of Halo. Interesting. I believe this is a person who had actually experience working into video games. There are things that divide us, and including those really decisive things, I think, distracts people from the human stories that we can all identify with. Tammet said, I have two concerns with including phosphorus as a weapon. Number one is that Number one is that it's not a part of the stories that those guys told us. So I don't have to have authentic, factual basis on which to tell that. That's most important. Number two is I don't want to sensationalize types of things to distract from the parts of that experience. I wonder if he's going to talk about also exploitation of war, especially when it comes to war atrocities. I mean, we see that when it comes to video games, but under the realm of parody instead of exploitation. So I do wonder how that goes. The same is true of the depleted uranium munitions used during the battle. The super dense shells, commonly associated with the tank-busting A-10 Warhawk, can fragment and shatter on impact. So, I'm just going to say this for people who really have some issues understanding English, even people who are actually learn English as the first language. Warhawk. This is actually how you pronounce Warhawk, even though there's a TH. And silently, it makes a noise because it's not completely silent, because it would be Warhog. But it's Warhog because the TH is silent, but not in the way it's silent where it will make a noise by itself, but with OG. Welcome to English. Scattering their heavy metal payload around, that could be why researchers show an increased incidence of cancers among the current population of Fallujah, especially in children. We asked Hamted what responsibility his team bears in communicating that outcome of the second battle of Fallujah to consumers. I feel like, to do it justice, they really have to go on the nitty-gritty of the UN coalition during the first Gulf War, because that's when it was purported that they actually used uranium shells. And also, if you also believe in the conspiracy theory that they started using uranium shells around the 80s when it came to testing some weapons while there was conflict around certain regions in the Middle East. But, you know, there was a lot. There was the Iran-Iraq War against Iran and Iraq. There was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. You have also other skirmishes and stuff. And, you know, that coincides with some things that occur, not just because of a single event. So if they did just say put that in a single event, how would they put it? But this goes back to the whole idea of narrative. After all, showing the average experience of a soldier, a marine, a civilian, an insurgent, a person, in a conflict, you sort of steer away from the historical parts because you could romanticize the event and not the individuals, which that would create some bias and not self-understanding in a holistic view under historical events that occur. I can elaborate more about that sometime later. Alrighty. I don't think players are going to be confused about the cost of war, Town said. I just don't think that they're going to walk away from this experience going, we need more war. I don't think that's something that the Marines and soldiers want as a message. I don't think that's something that the Iraqi civilians want as a message. I don't think people do need to understand the human cost of war. Tamte continued, perhaps playing the game will make them curious and they'll want to learn more about all the things that have happened in Fallujah since the 2004 battle, and that will lead them to their own conclusions from doing the research. But right now, simply ignoring the battle is not going to cause them to think about all of its consequences. In making 6 Days of Fallujah, Tamte and his team interviewed Marines and soldiers who fought there. Just months after the battle was over, then again as recently as last year, They will be the avatars that players fight alongside. The challenge of moving house to house, engaging in some of the most violent urban combat since Vietnam, will make up 90% of the game's action. The other 10%, Tamti said, will be given over to the story of the city's civilian population. Not in a narrative sense, though. That's what I'm pursuing. So, in what sense? I'm focusing on the gameplay. I want to know if they talk more about the gameplay. Working with an American journalist in Iraq whose name is being withheld for their safety, according to Tamti, developer Highwire Games has interviewed dozens of civilians who lived throughout the fighting. Their stories will give the game its parallel storyline where players will take on the role of a father trying to lead his family to safety. That family story will overlap with U.S. forces in the game. Oh man, I'm having some serious Medal of Honor and OG Call of Duty vibes where they usually have loading screens of diaries of the individuals. Not much of a narrative sense where there's a cinematic thing, but more in a Half-Life sense where pretty much you have the character of Gordon Freeman along with several other characters like in Half-Life Opposing Force and Blue Shift, the spin-offs. Showcasing a storyline while being first person, since what is it? It's not going to be a third person anymore, so there will be a change of how people perceive it. But yeah, now I'm actually sort of imagining that. Imagine the game being the perspective that's always just first person. I do want to see that because not many games try to do that. And when people say that it's like a way different experience, it is because not many games do that. So yeah, more the merrier, I guess. Or I'm hopeful. Yep. This is an unarmed Iraqi civilian, Tamti stressed. We do not at any point ask the player to become an insurgent. To be clear about that, this is an Iraqi civilian who was trying to get his family out of the city during the battle. In an FAQ of the game's website, Victoria notes that players will never play as an insurgent during a single-player campaign or in the multiplayer recreation of the actual event. What was it? Because freaking one of the reboots, 2012 or 2010, the 2010s reboot of Medal of Honor, freaking in the multiplayer you got to play as the Taliban, but there was just backlash that they just went with opposing force. Which was just odd because when they made the change, which was very silently, so it does show that there is some other not political matter. I'm thinking more of the political matter of where there were like company politics and businesses that are occurring instead of U.S. politics and ideology would play, because politics always exists in so many places. Hell, people talk about video games in the Fallout universe and history in the background of it, which is pretty much politics. But it's in a game, so people are less in compared to real life stuff. But yeah, there's some background history that I can guess under the Medal of Honor choice on that change most likely played. Besides that, there was also just popular media talking about how military personnel in the Pentagon dislike that, and it's supporting insurgent propaganda, or military bases are not allowing to play anymore. That really doesn't matter because now everything is digital. Because was around 2010s, there was still a good amount of physical games compared to like now in the PC. definitely on the PC. Of course, this isn't the first time that Tamte, yeah, tried to get this game made. He says he's been working on it for over 15 years, effectively since the months after the Second Battle of Fallujah ended. What hung it up last time wasn't the outcry over alleged war crimes. Instead, it was the coalition of a different sort. This was made up of the families of the service members who died in the Iraq War. The outrage became its talking point for the international media and ultimately helped pressure Konami into dropping the game in 2009. I believe it's just because also the combined lettering is a little bit private. Not the interviews, but private petition between that. But in this mine, I'll let you know, it's just speculation from my end because I do not know much about it, but I've heard of many videos and some articles talking about it, which I can't verify in top of my head if they were accurate, they were just sensational yellow journalism, or any such. Maybe it could just be opinion pieces by people who just didn't say opinion piece on the web title, which, you know, that's the key. That's the nature of videos and some articles nowadays. One of the other dodges that many military-inspired games make is that they fictionalize their settings. There are made-up soldiers and made-up marines, developers say, fighting a battle in a made-up country. Tamte and the team of Hardwire are going into a different direction by putting real people into their game. So what does Tamte has to say to those families once again outraged that their relative's death is included, even peripherally, in this way? A perfect example, lately, 2019 with Modern Warfare, was freaking making a real life event that occurred in the Iraq War be a set point against the Russians in a mission where you pretty much have to ambush and kill some Russian forces along with some insurgents that were against your faction. And, you know, referring to the Highway of Death, which pretty much it's known as also the Highway of Death incident. Well, massacre, depending on how you put it. But I'll say an incident in a way where it's an incident that became a controversial point of war crimes in the Middle East in the 2000s. Not the Iraq War, because lo and behold, there's been a bunch of war crimes that occurred in that area region, even till today, because the reality is that you have a opposing force that doesn't abide to the Geneva Conventions, who don't follow the rules to take care of POWs, and also go on guerrilla tactics and arming themselves on man, woman, child, elderly, young, youth, to called for a holy war, which brings into a territory of disturbingness that people can think about in some past controversial events that occurred in history that we know now that it was a different time, and that's the trickiness about modern war against the war on terror, or really just insurgents, to see in the future. Well, I'm gonna talk more about it next time. Other than that, ciao.